Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Building the Foundation for Your Skills-Based Organization Strategy. I'm your host, Claude Werder. I'm an analyst in Learning and Talent Development for Brandon Hall Group. Today we feature Steve Boucher, Director of Strategic Initiatives at Degreed. Steve's a learning futurist and technology evangelist with a passion for innovation. He has a great approach to building a skills-based organization I think will really be enlightening for everyone. In his role at Degreed, Steve helps connect learners to the content, people, and the experiences that matter most to them. Steve's a next practice ideator and master problem solver who partners with organizations to achieve success through learning and talent solutions. With 7 years of practitioner experience as the leader and architect of MasterCard's learning ecosystem, Steve joined Degreed to help other companies solve their business challenges through the combination of technology and strategy. And you'll hear from Steve in just a few minutes. But first, I want to take a couple of minutes to thank our webinar sponsor, Degreed. They're a technology suite that combines lifelong learning and data-driven development so organizations can collect, understand, and build skills for greater impact, which evolves how their workforce works. Degreed is the only learning platform that makes it easy for companies to deliver daily learning, deep skill building, education benefits, real-time insights, and expert services while connecting to the most robust and open ecosystem. Each day, over 9 million learners from hundreds of global companies use Degreed to gain the skills to grow in their careers. Degreed, founded in 2012, launched with the mission of jailbreaking the degree, where all skills are recognized irrespective of how they are acquired. And Degreed is headquartered in Pleasanton, California, with offices in Salt Lake City, New York, London, Amsterdam, and Brisbane, Australia. For those of you who aren't familiar with Brandon Hall Group, we're a human capital management research and advisory firm that empowers excellence in organizations around the world through our research and tools. We have 6 practice areas, including learning and development, talent management, leadership development. Quick mention that we currently have several certification programs open for enrollment, including our Certified Learning Strategist program. Visit certification.brandonhall.com to learn more about how you can earn that designation. Your participation in Brandon Hall Group's research surveys is one of the most crucial components of our insights and thought leadership. So if you can just take a few minutes to spare and see any topics that you can take a survey for, it's greatly appreciated. You can see here, we just launched our HCM Outlook 2024 survey, which tries to get a handle on what your most important issues are in the coming year. And we also have a leadership development survey out in the field. Links will be available in your handout, or you can always visit brandonhall.com. All participants in surveys receive a piece of complimentary research once the results are analyzed. And finally, a few logistics to go over. To ask questions, please use the questions panel on your control bar. We'll leave time at the end for questions. We also may stop along the way for questions. The webinar is being recorded, and we will share a link to the recording and a PDF of the presentation via email in roughly 24 hours. But if you'd like to download a copy of today's presentation instantly, the link to do so will be available in the chat shortly. The chat is also open for today, and we really hope you will share your thoughts and experiences as we go along the webinar today. We'll try to prompt you a couple times along the way. Your feedback and perspective on what we present and any experiences that you're going through that we might be able to address will make the webinar more valuable for everyone. So please join in on today's discussion, share your thoughts as we go through, or if you prefer, just simply pop in, say hello, and let us know where you're joining from today. Okay, so let's get to the content, right? Let's get started with a few snippets from Brandon Hall Group research to understand the current state of skills development in many organizations. So first of all, it's important to know that about 86% of organizations are in the process of hiring for job roles or categories that are new to their business. About 59%, as shown in this graphic, are currently hiring for new job roles. 21 are considering it, maybe waiting for the right time, and another 6% plan to do it yet this year or sometime in 2024. So this is according to our study, Hiring for New Jobs and New Skills, conducted earlier this year. In addition, almost all organizations have at least some of these new job roles that require new skills that generally are not present in the organization now. However, to put that in perspective, in 87% of organizations, less than 1/4 of the new job roles require new skills. Sometimes we talk about this as though every new job has new skills. That's not true. Actually, most of them don't. Still, if you are a relatively small organization with lean resources or a large organization with a lot of different jobs, finding new employees that have the newly required skills or training current employees on the skills they will need can be a daunting task. When it comes to existing job roles, almost all of them require most all organizations require at least some new skills. But again, in 80% of organizations, less than 1/4 of the existing roles required new skills. But again, developing and delivering the learning and creating a strategy for delivering that learning can be a major undertaking. So what tends to happen in many organizations is the learning function gets right to work developing learning for these new skills. This graphic shows, I believe, the modalities most often used to deliver learning on new skills for existing or new roles. Sorry. What often gets lost in the rush, though, is a sound skills strategy. So in a world in which new skills are becoming the currency for future success, skills learning is often developed without a full understanding or a strategic process for becoming a skills-based organization. Or on the other hand, the other extreme is some organizations plan to the hilt and don't do anything until they have what they think is a workable strategy. And that doesn't work either because you don't get going. And a lot of this, as Steve will talk to you about, is kind of a phased approach and learning as you're going. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve. I think you'll find that his approach is as thorough and strategic as you've heard. So if you're just thinking about being a skills-based organization or have started your journey but are looking for additional guidance or insights, I think this will be very helpful. And again, feel free to put comments in the chat as we go or ask questions, and we'll try to address some as we go along. And we'll leave time at the end as well. So Steve, all yours.
Wonderful. Claude, thank you very much. And thank you to Brandon Hall Group for hosting us. Very excited to have this conversation. And this happens to be a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I'd like to first of all start off with a statement around the emergence of the SBO from Degreed's own Chief Transformation Officer, Janice Burns. She's our thought leader on sales-based organizations, and those companies that we work with, seek out her guidance in understanding the what and the why behind a skills-based organization. I like to say I come in after the what and the why has been figured out and determine the how. And so if we think about skills-based organizations, I want to hone in on one place on Janice's statement here, which is acquire the skills they need to do the work of today and how quickly they can build the skills that are required to do the work of tomorrow. So the skills of today and tomorrow, you're going to hear me repeat several themes throughout this conversation, but ultimately it boils down to that. Do we have the skills that we need to deliver on our business strategy today, and then have the skills that we need to deliver on our future business strategy? And so we're going to boil it down where we're connecting skills to business. And then where Degreed comes in, of course, is we talk about connecting learning to skills. And so as we go through this conversation, the learning and development component of this is very critical. And so a little bit more background. Of course, my role at Degreed today, but in the past, I've spent over 20 years in corporate learning and development. And just one seed I want to plant with this group, which is, those of you that have been in learning and development for a long time, the end goal has always been skills. If we think about our ability to provide knowledge and capabilities to employees, we want to make sure that the end result is they've acquired the ability to perform a task, to deliver or demonstrate certain behaviors. And so if we think about the end goal is that we've always thought about skills in the learning and development space, but now it's been brought to the forefront. And so we're going to talk a little bit more through how some of your organizations can help build up and bring an operationalization mindset to this. So Claude, now next slide, please. All right. So if we think about it, and again, you're going to hear me, I love to try to simplify as much as possible. And when we think about skills-based organizations, here's definition of skills-based organization. But if I were to boil it down and make it very simple, if we think about a role-based organization, I'm an organization and I need to hire roles in order to come in and perform work. So if I have software development work, I'm going to hire software developers. If I have DevOps work, I need to hire DevOps engineers. In this case, that works. But a lot of times what we see is when we're hiring in for roles, we tend to have to, there's a limited, or there's a time to productivity challenge because that individual has to come in and maybe gain more skills in order to be able to do the work. So what I'm trying to differentiate here in this conversation is if we think about the role-based model, right? I'm hiring roles to fill, or I'm hiring individuals to fill roles versus skills-based organization is I'm hiring individuals with the right combination of skills to do the work. So skills for the role, skills for the work. And we're going to dive into this much more, but very simple, just very simple definition of what we think of a skills-based organization. Again, trying to boil it down for everyone so we can think of a way to move forward. So next slide, please. So what do we think about skills-based organizations? They share some common characteristics, and these are topics that tend to be near and dear to my heart. And like I always said, the end game always being skills, but that skills-based learning culture. So, one of the ways to gauge your organization is, are we delivering learning just to say we delivered learning, or are we delivering learning for a specific outcome? And then what is that outcome? Now, there's the work that you have to do, right? You have to onboard employees, you have to give them compliance training, but then it moves to a point to say within this organization, the work that you need to do, you need to learn in order to acquire the right skills. So that skills-based learning culture is important by having the focus of the end result being the skills. And so that changes that mindset. It's not just learning for learning's sake, it's learning with the outcome of skills. And then more importantly, it's the skills-based employees. You'll hear me talk about culture a lot, but building that culture around skills as the currency of work is important. If you think about kind of the timeline of skills and where they've become the forefront over the last few years, the thought around skills before then, and I know this in many circles, especially with the people team or the HR teams, there was some trepidation around skills because when you start to reach out to your population and say, I have a list of skills I want you to rate yourselves, that tends to then create this image of, or this thought of, well, why do you need my skill information? Is that going to be used for hiring or firing decisions? Or I was told one time, the weaponization of skill data. Yeah. The key here is the focus is that skills should be something that are for employees. And then the administration, the L&D teams are the ones that benefit from employees interacting with skills, but it should be a tool for employees so they feel comfortable noting the skills that they have at which proficiency levels, and they're encouraged to develop their skills, not only acquiring new skills, but growing existing skills. So having skills-based employees that are focused on the outcome. More importantly is making sure that you can make use of that skill data. So if we think about the integrated skills tech ecosystem, and these are problems that we're trying to tackle today, which is within your talent ecosystem, you have your HCM suite, which may include your employee or your worker profiles. You may have a talent acquisition platform, an internal mobility platform, performance, learning. So if you think about pulling all those together and supporting the interoperability of skill data across all of those platforms, you need a tech ecosystem where those platforms are speaking the same language of skills. And so that integrated skills tech ecosystem is important here because the more that you can use skilled data across your talent ecosystem, the more you're going to find value out of that. And then last but not least, just to focus on one area here, which is calculating the economic value of skills. Now, this is an interesting topic because if you think about, and I look at skills from a basic, and again, this is rudimentary economics perspective, but skills from a supply and demand perspective. What are the skills that I need? What's my skill demand? What are the skills that I have? How do I compare those and understand my gap? So that's one area to look at. But if we start to then think about, do I have more skills than I need in one area or fewer skills than I specifically need to execute on a business strategy? What is the value of those skills? And that always back ends into your L&D or your talent budgets for the year. And where are we going to put most of our investment in order to achieve the greatest value out of skills? And so some skills have more value than others. And if we think about some of the more scarce skills that are emerging and how important it is to understand the value of those skills and then what that means to your organization and then make the right investments. But then on the flip side of that, you may have invested year over year in developing specific skills and you're not getting a lot of lift out of that. So skills do have a value, and a lot of that is based on the volume of skills, the volume and proficiency of skills in your organization. If you have a lot of the skills and you have highly skilled people at it, then your economic value for that skill may not be as high as maybe a skill you're trying to recruit from the market because you don't have it internally. And it's a very in-demand skill. And so, of course, I would be remiss to not mention, we know that generative AI has emerged on the scene over the past year, and prompt engineering has become a valuable skill for conversational AI. And so if you think about, what's that value in your organization? And so looking at calculating, or not necessarily, you don't have to have a monetary value, but some skills are more important than others. And those tend to become kind of your critical organizational skills, or more importantly, if we think about skills-based organizations, the work that we have to do today and the work that we have to do tomorrow. So I see that a question has come up. I'm going to ask for clarification on that here in just a moment. I'm going to go to a couple of other slides, and then we'll come back to the question on what are the scarce skills. But thank you for who answered that. Now, skills-based employees. If I think about the old notion, and not necessarily an old notion, but T-shaped and I-shaped individuals. So if we focus on skills and what that means for employees and how they want to develop their skills, you have individuals that maybe have a broad skill set. Those are the generalists. And then you have your specialists, those that are functional or technical experts. So understanding how you want to build those skill profiles to do the work, what generalists do you have? What specialists do you have? But more importantly, you start to think about, where do you have adjacency in skills? So if I have individuals that have a wide set, if I have a utility player, maybe they're more mobile across the organization to do different types of high-level work. But then I have my functional or my specialists, those that are very deep in a specific area. They may not necessarily have that broad skill set as a generalist, but they maybe have adjacent skills. Again, I use software development because it's an easy way for us to resonate. But if I already know Java as a programming language and I'm very deep in Java, what is the amount of time, resources, investment that we need to make to upskill me in a specific or another area? So I'm moving from Java to Python. What is the distance between those skills? And if I have the skill in Java, is it easy to pick up the skill in Python? So a skill strategy can support your utility players. It can support your specialists. It's all about understanding what the skills mean in your organization, and more importantly, those relationships, because you start to tie work together. Now, if you think about, on the flip side of that, the skills-based work, and I like to use the concept or the notion of you coming in, and it's that technology business management approach, if we think about it this way. So if I'm looking at project work that needs to be done, and I say I need to deliver work that is the capacity of our 5 full-time resources for 6 months. So that is one way, and that's role-based hiring, right? I need a certain amount of people with this job profile for this amount of time. Versus maybe looking at, I need the capacity of 5 individuals that have these combinations of these skills to do this work. Now they can more broadly stretch across different projects. So if we think about skills-based work, is it putting an individual in a role who's sitting idle? Or is it taking a person with the right combination of skills and being able to basically drop them into work throughout the week? And so now you're managing projects, or you're managing that work, maybe 20 hours spent on this project or this work, and 10 hours spent on this work, and another 10 spent on this work. So more broad utilization of that skill set based on the work that the individual needs to deliver. So taking that skills-based employee approach, but also taking that skills-based work and making sure that you're getting the most out of your resources, or in this case, most out of your employees that are delivering the work for you. All right, next slide, please.
Okay, the next slide is actually a poll question, and then maybe after that we can tackle a couple of these questions. So we just wanted you to participate in a quick poll to get a sense of where you are in your approach to skills development. So your choices are, the question is, which of the following best describes your approach to skills development? The first choice is, we train on new skills as they are communicated to us or introduced to the organization. 2, we are building a culture of continuous learning around skills. C, we're beginning to build a skills-based organization strategy. And then D, we're a full-fledged skills-based organization. So this kind of question helps us kind of get a sense of where you are as we move forward, and then we'll try to address a couple of these questions and then move on. So in a few seconds, Melissa can show us what we've got here, and then we'll get to your questions. And here we go. So the great majority are building a culture of continuous learning or beginning to build a skills-based organization strategy. And notice that really no one is at the place where they've got a full-fledged skills-based organization. So I think Steve's gonna be talking about 5 different phases of skills strategy development, and I think that'll help you maybe push forward if that's what you're looking to do and you're just in the beginning of your journey. So Steve, let's maybe address at least one of these questions, maybe about scarce skills.
Thank you. And I may need a little bit more clarification on the scarce skills, but let me give my answer, and then we can dive into a little bit more. There's actually, we talk a little bit about this, the skill and learning insights. And if we think about scarce skills, if I look across my organization and there is possibly an emerging skill. So I come from financial services, and one of the emerging skills at the time, early in that was, of course, blockchain's been around since Bitcoin has been around since 2008. But if you've noticed, cryptocurrency, and you say what you will about the ebbs and flows of cryptocurrency and the market today. But if at a time, blockchain development was an in-demand skill because cryptocurrency got hot. And if you see the financial services organizations, they didn't catch up until 2020, 2021. Now, if you think about when did you start to see the emerging trends around cryptocurrency, that was potentially earlier, but more importantly, the work that drives that, blockchain developers, an in-demand skill, very expensive to hire from the market at the time. And so if you would have had an indicator of a skill that was starting to emerge, you'd never seen it or it was not on your radar, but it's starting to give you an idea of a potential disruption to your organization. And so there's a couple of factors you can look at. How many open positions or how many open recs do we have for people with blockchain skills? Have we looked internally? And that's the key when we start to think about scarce skills, right? Because I know I have demand. I'm about to go out and hire 5 blockchain developers. I look internally in my systems, and this is why it's important to speak the currency of work, because you want to know any of those hidden nuggets, right? Those diamonds in the rough that are in your organization, individuals that may have blockchain development skills and just need them further developed or cultivated. But the important piece of that is it becomes a scarce skill because you have less supply than demand. But scarce skills, and depending on the question, it really is defined by your organization. So I go back to the supply and demand question, which is how many skills, how many individuals or how many resources with these skills do I need? Do I have those skills internally? If there is a gap or if there is a deficit, then that then becomes a scarce skill depending on what the size of that deficit is. So again, oversimplifying, I'm not sure if that 100% answered the question, but please let us know if that answers or if you'd like to follow up.
Just to add a little perspective on that too, to Steve's point, it depends on your organization. And what our research has found, interestingly, is that when people are looking to the outside for skills, they're usually looking more for technical skills, programming languages, things like that. But when they're looking for skills that they're adding to existing job roles, they're often foundational skills, or what has sometimes been called soft skills, or what I like to refer to as human power skills. And sometimes organizations that aren't sure about the types of technical skills that they need because things are changing so quickly and they can't get a handle on it, they are beginning to understand that they need to build some of those foundational skills, because those foundational skills are necessary even in technical jobs, where if somebody needs technical skills but they're working on a team and they need to be able to communicate well and collaborate well, they can develop those human skills which are going to carry forward really no matter where the technology goes, but that the technology may be changing very quickly. So that scarcity and that emphasis, I think, depends a lot, as getting back to what Steve said, in what your organization really needs, which I think ties in nicely to our next slide, and what we're moving toward is understanding what you have and the data around skills, right, Steve?
Right. So and I love, this is probably one of my favorite kind of topics to talk about, because this spans the duration of my professional career in learning and development. And, if you think about and one, it's linear, looks like a timeline. There's no bad place to be. It's just setting up to say, where are we today and where do we want to be? You don't have to go in a specific order. You can hop around. You can go forwards or backwards or left or right. The key here is thinking about your organization. Now, when I started learning and development, I was on the far left, that core training function. We had to make sure that, we delivered mandatory compliance training and onboarding and functional skills training. But it was all things that had to be developed. And what were we measuring? We were measuring volume. How much were we delivering? How many hours? How many people trained? And at the end of the year, we wanted to get to one metric, and that much was, did we improve from the last year? Were we able to train more people for less money? And that was the metric way back with the first organization I started with. But as we progressed, we started to look at, we need to, and learning and development, I know it sometimes, and it ebbs and flows with the years, but sometimes L&D is not looked at as, well, back when I started, it was overhead. And so L&D teams were the first teams that were looked at when you needed to start making some cuts. And so we had to think about, how do we better justify? And of course, you'll recognize the strategic learning function, the business aligned content, and you'll notice the 4 levels of evaluation here, right? But it's looking to achieve that, or to build that value. Do my people like it? Have they learned something? Are they retaining those behaviors? And then ultimately I can come back and calculate, what is the return on investment? If I made this investment to train so many people, what is that return and how do I calculate it? Now, great. It's a start. It's a piece in your overall story. So as you start to progress, we start to then see you're moving away from just the core training function to learning, right? You're building that culture of continuous learning where people are actively seeking out opportunities to learn, but more importantly, to acquire new skills or to develop existing skills. And so that opened the door for skills as the currency of work. And so most organizations that are looking to become a skills-based organization first need to speak of skills as the currency of work. And it's that culture again, right? Understanding what skills are most important to your organization. How do you find that out? Then looking at things like skill progression and velocity. Again, I mentioned very importantly that, we're looking at skill volume and skill proficiency, and how much is that growing based on what the learning that I'm delivering in order to support that. And then once I start to get into this flow, I can then better understand year over year, what is my skill supply versus skill demand, understand how to close those gaps and grow. So speaking as skills as the currency of work, it's important that the culture is brought along, but then you have the necessary components in place to understand, again, skills you need versus skills you have. Once you've achieved that, that moves to that skills-based organization where you can start really applying strategic workforce planning, taking those insights. And, you imagine, I dream of that day where the CLO or the CHRO, the chief people officer, can go directly to the board or go to the executive committee and say, based on the talent data that we have around our skills, we need to focus our business strategy here, or we need to change our business strategy based on the talent that we have. And so that approach then helps you to break down some of those barriers and move into that innovation phase, right? You're now building value because of the skills you have in the organization. And so that falls back into, attract the best talent, develop the best talent, and retain the best talent. And it's all about what that talent has and its skills. So moving into that skills talent life cycle. And again, your end result may be skills-based organization on the left, but anywhere where you're starting, or I'm sorry, on the right, anywhere that you're starting, knowing it's just the important piece is putting in the plan, and second, more importantly, not overcomplicating it. And we'll talk about that on the next slide, please. All right, wonderful. So Claude mentioned earlier the skill strategy journey, and we have, based on the research, we've laid this out, or it's laid out into 5 steps. So I'll say it's laid out in 5 steps. And when we take this approach, it's methodical, it's high level, What I tend to see here is there's a lot of analysis paralysis, and that paralysis happens at the developed skills. In fact, what I see a lot of organizations do is they kind of jump ahead, collect and assess, and they get right to develop. Okay, these are the skills that we're going to develop because we're told they're the most important. And then 6 months, a year later, wow, we couldn't really connect it to the business strategy because we needed to have better insights and to assess the data that we already had. So again, I talk about that culture. A lot of organizations want to develop skills and build a skills taxonomy and map skills to roles. So they're doing some of that phase 3 work when really you have to understand what roles have what skills in your organization to begin with, right? Collecting the data, getting your employees more comfortable with it, then looking at that data, understanding it, building the right insights, then you're more informed to be able to develop those skills. So again, when we talk about the learning experience platform, it's connecting learning to skills. And then now you bring in your other HR systems, right? Your talent marketplaces, your career mobility platforms, your HCM suites, where you can start to deploy skills across the organization. I'm going to add one piece to this as well. It's not just deploying skills, but it's also growing careers, right? Because individuals that are skilled in the right way to deliver work across the company also are probably motivated to grow their careers in some way. And so by having that skill information, having those experiences, having that knowledge will then allow you to better help support the career growth of employees. So deploying skills across the organization, but supporting career growth. And then again, you look at value, and value can come from many different areas, right? Have we executed on our business strategy with efficiency? Have we reduced operating expenses? Have we increased sales? All because we have the right people that are skilled, that are delivering the work at the highest level. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this, but if we think about starting simply, but again, not necessarily missing any steps. So let's dive into collecting the data on the next slide, please. Now, I'm not going to go through each step of this. It's a lot for this conversation, but the thing I do want to highlight here is that it's one of the most important pieces is understanding how you're going to collect the skill data, what skill data you're going to collect, and then what you're going to do with it. So if we think about, now you bring in the technology ecosystem, right? Where are all of the different sources of skill information coming from? And then can I pull it all into one place? More importantly, what can I get out of it? So if we think about from a technology ecosystem and we're dealing with skills, that boils down to what can I put into the system and what can I get out? So if I put in my skills taxonomy, if I put in my job architecture into a system, can I get out of it skill data when employees are interacting with skills, either through learning or through just updating their own skills based on their experiences, putting in that information? So what can I put into the system? What can I get out? Now you build your framework around that and understanding that the end in mind is as much as I want to be able to put in, I need to get value of whatever's coming out of that. And that's where the insights and supporting the HR teams or the L&D and talent teams is very important. It's the use of that data, but it's very important to ensure that it's structured the right way. Again, so you know what you're putting in, you know what you're getting out. Skill data, first and most important piece. And I want to leave you with one statement here I always love to say, which is let the data inform your strategy. So if you were to take the approach and say, I'm going to go to my executive team and I'm going to ask them what the top skills are. Most likely what's going to happen is they will give you some names of individuals on their teams, or they will come off the top of their head and maybe give you broad topics. Cybersecurity is important, and business acumen and communication. Those are all important skills. But what's left is the L&D and talent teams have to go and translate that, maybe synthesize that, be able to translate it, and then develop a strategy out of that, and then report it back up to their senior leadership or where they've gotten direction from. There's nothing wrong with that. It maybe takes you a little bit more time. In some organizations, they look to speed that up a little bit by engaging an external partner to come in and help them understand that. Again, that is a positive step as well. Where I think you would benefit from both of those from both of those different situations is starting with the data first. Now, if you can imagine, if you were going to your business executives and instead of saying, what are the top 10 skills needed for your organization? If you said, here's the top skills, or here's the number of skills, or here's these skills, the number of skills and the proficiency level that you have within your organization. So now it gives them something to respond to, right? If you look at that top 10 list of skills, they may say, oh, that's that skill was not on my radar. Or, you know what, we've got a lot of that skill and we are planning on investing a lot of money in this next year, but it looks like we don't really need to invest because a lot of people have the skill and they're confident we can prove it. So the important piece of that is ensuring that you're using the data to help ask the right questions to then formulate their strategy. And asking the right questions, it's better to present somebody with the data, have them respond. It'll save you time, but also from an L&D perspective, it makes you look like a rock star in front of your business partners because you're coming to them with data, you're informing them, and you're asking them to respond versus having to pull it right out of their heads. All right. Love talking about data. As you can tell, it's one of my favorite topics here and how we can leverage skill data. But let's take a look at the next slide, please. So, as we've gone into skills, the questions emerge. Not as much lately, but it has emerged. It's okay. Well, we've got a competency framework, or we've got a competency model. We're going to have to reevaluate that, and so we're going to have to define the difference in our organization between competencies and skills. The problem with that is that most every organization I speak with, they define skills versus competencies many different ways. I'm going to give you yet another definition, but again, I'm trying to oversimplify it. So in this case, if we think about what is your target audience for the skills, and we use skills and competencies, interchangeably sometimes, or you can use them in a hierarchical, structure of a conversation. But let's just boil it down to this. So if we think about organizational competencies, one organizational competency may be leadership, right? And so everyone, whether you are a people leader or an individual contributor, need to demonstrate some type of leadership, whether it's people leadership or self-leadership. So if you think about your competencies, your values, it's skills every employee needs to be successful at the company. So that's bar none, every single employee. That's part of the onboarding. We want them familiar with this. We want to make sure we build in a plan in their development that everyone at the company is going to have this. And so that, then you can start looking at your mission, vision, values behind and how your company makes money. So these are the things that everybody needs to know. But if you take it down one level, and I'll use the example of a project manager. So you have a project manager, and every project manager at the company needs to have these skills, right? They need budget management, organization, time management, Gantt charts. And so those are the skills that every project manager at the company needs to have. However, if you're a project manager and you're working in finance versus a project manager that's working in marketing, those require two different additional skill sets, or they require additional different skill sets within that function or that work area. So if we think about every project manager needs to have these skills. However, if you're a project manager going in finance, you need to have financial acumen and accounting. If you're a project manager going in marketing, you need to know marketing and social media. And so that's where we start to get and make sense of skills required to do the work. There is a place for roles in organizations. Not saying that, hey, when you move from a role-based organization to skills-based organization, you dump the roles, because you don't do that. Again, every role in the organization that we hire on needs to have these skills by default. But then now what we're looking at is we're looking at the skills that are required to do the work. So when I'm recruiting, I'm looking for the right employee with the right combination of experience that demonstrates that they can perform that work. Or if I'm developing skills, again, I'm looking at developing skills where the person is doing their work and not specifically performing a role. And then last but not least, it's the skills that your employees bring in, right? The skills they have, the skills they want to have, or the skills that they want to grow. So you have to contend with those. So if you think about it now, we simplify it, right? It's skills everyone needs to know, skills people in a specific role need to know, skills people doing work need to know, and then individual skills that they bring to the table. More importantly here is how do we make that connection between skills for the work and skills for the individual? Because I want to grow my career. I'm doing work. I'm taking on projects. I've changed roles in the organization. So for me, that's career development. And it's very important to connect skills required to do the work and building up the breadth and depth of that employee's expertise to help make that connection to career development. The more in-demand skills that you develop, the more opportunities for career growth that you're going to have at the company. And so making sure you're connecting those is very important, because we don't want to disregard individual skills and what they want to develop. In fact, we want to nurture that. We want to cultivate that. Right. But more importantly, how do we connect to the work? Claude, like to add on that.
Yeah, I can't say enough about the importance of trying to connect the skills for work and the skills for the individual. When we do research and we ask people what are the biggest things they need to address in their organization in terms of employee experience and talent retention, career development is far and away the most important. But you also need to develop skills. That's also toward the top of the list. So the key to success, as Steve said, is connect the two. The more you can show people that the skills they need to do their current job and to do the work is also going to help them move and advance within the organization, the more buy-in you're going to be and the more compelling your argument for your skills strategy is.
Claude, thank you for that. Yeah, love it. And this is Claude and I were prepping for the prepping for this. He made the statement, this is probably one of the most important slides that we have in this presentation, just to help simplify and make those connections for everyone. So thank you for adding that in, Claude. All right, let's take a look at the next slide. And so as importantly as it is connecting the skill data, if you're not doing anything with it, right, you're not getting any value out of it. So it's assessing the skill data. And there's different ways to look at this. We've got one thing that we're tracking to begin with, right? When we're collecting skill data, and that's volume. So how many, and important here, right? It's relative to your audience. If I, the previous slide, if we think about everybody in the company needs to have this skill, well, then I'm looking at 100% of the company's population. But, how many project managers in marketing do you have? If you only have 5 project managers in marketing, you're not, if you have 5 skills in search engine optimization, on your marketing team, and it's like, well, that's, we have 1,000 people in our company. 5 is not a lot. Well, if 5 is the total size of your target audience, you're hitting 100%. So thinking about it that way is, if we reference that other slide, it's skills relative to your target population when evaluating volume. So very important to keep that in mind, because it's not one size fits all for everyone. It depends on your target audience. Now, if you think about the other component of that, which is, okay, it's one thing to have them, people say what skills they have. It's another thing for a system to maybe infer skills, but I need more confidence in the data. What else can I add to that? Can I get the perspective of the individual, get their self-rating? Or can I get the perspective of whether that individual is demonstrating the knowledge and behaviors of those skills? Now, who's the best to provide that perspective? My peers and my manager. So being able to pull in calibration rating data, and then even credentials, right? Or artifacts, badging. So I've attained badges or certifications. And so, that's an easy way to very easily collect and add more data points to your skill data, right? Volume is one data point. Now, do I add proficiency as another data point? And then how much, how deep do I want to get into proficiency? And there's tons of tools available, right? So we talked about the left-hand side where people are providing input or their past experience or history. But then, I want more confidence in the knowledge. I want someone to prove it. So maybe online assessments, certifications. One big area is simulations that we're starting to see emerge now. Now, providers that are providing simulations, not just around, and of course, the common is simulations around coding or performing specific actions within a tool. But now simulations with AI are getting more sophisticated, where they can start to evaluate soft skills based on how individuals interact within that simulation. So, of course, the tried and true live simulation, right? You can just do an over-the-shoulder observation. Interviews are a great way to also assess someone's value or assess somebody's proficiency in a skill. Of course, we know that happens all the time, because if I'm hiring you for a role, I'm going to evaluate your past work and your ability to tell the story around how you utilize skills to deliver on that work. Again, another way to assess, a little bit clunky if you have to interview every single person, but just another way to think about skill data points that give you more confidence in your skill data, and then finding that right combination, what you feel gives you the most confidence. All right, so next one. Next slide, please. All right, and the last piece on the skill data, very important here, and this goes a little bit to the scarce skills. And when I think about pulling my insights, I have potentially 3 different outcomes. And again, this is not, you may have other ways of looking at data. I think it's just taking that simplified approach, which is, 1, I've made a decision in my organization. I need to prove or disprove that decision that I made. So that's typically, I'm looking at reactive insights, right? I'm looking at my skill and learning data to tell me if I made the right decision or not. And then the next one is proactive. I'm looking to make a decision and I need the system to give me guidance on the decision that I should make. And then last but not least, it's that predictive skill data. It's are there things going on? Are there disruptions happening today or potential disruptions that are happening that I'm not necessarily seeing? So what the insights are telling me are disruptions that I may need to keep an eye out for. So if you apply that to skills, right? Did we select the right skills and did we make progress? The reactive side of it. What skills do we need to focus on developing in the upcoming year? Proactive. Predictive. What skills haven't been on our radar, but they're starting to emerge and could represent a significant impact to our business? Again, financial services and blockchain development or cryptocurrency was a small disruptor. I think it's kind of in the kind of in the decline at the point right now, but just a key area to look at and keeping an eye, right? Hey, blockchain development's hot, and then looking in the future, not so hot. Maybe we don't need to put as many investments into that. So this is where they all come together with that skill data. All right, next slide, please. I want to make sure we move on. So we have some great questions that are coming in here. Just a key area, and everyone's going to have this presentation after the fact, but the skills development approach, and we look at it very simply with the everyday learning, the essential learning, and the deep skilling. So if we think about the individual again, the everyday learning is stuff that I want to be motivated to go out and learn and pick up, right? That's that self-directed learning. That's where the LXP, where we've been able to carve out that market. But if you think about the essential learning, where the learning management systems have been a big component on, look, onboarding, compliance training, we maybe have events that are tied to a specific initiative that we need to focus on. And so that essential learning, the training that you need to do for your organization to stay healthy, or for your organization to function well. And then last but not least, that deep skilling. This is where you're looking at specific outcomes. And I know that, one that comes up to mind for me in my past is cybersecurity training, because we always, there's always new threats, and what are ways that I need to deep skill my employees, whether it's let's say my information security employees, to deep skill them to be prepared to handle the next wave of threats that may come. So I have a very focused audience, a very focused time frame, maybe even a very focused investment. So how am I building those skills, and then how am I deploying it to the organization? Very important. Keep in mind the 70-20-10 model. Education, experiences, exposure. It's bringing that right combination of the learning, the connections, the people, and then those experiences that help you really hone those skills. And then deciding on your skilling approach. Again, it's not one or the other. It's maybe I need to focus on different areas, whether I'm reskilling a population, or I'm upskilling maybe a junior population, or I'm cross-skilling to give more flexibility or more mobility across the company. So thinking about developing skills, and then what you would do with that skill data is even more important if we think about, so how am I going to measure my skill progression over time? So let's take a look at the next slide, please. Now, skill progression can happen in different ways. What I'm saying here, and I just want to make one quick point, is deploying skills is very important. But what's as important as deploying those skills is making sure that you put in place the opportunity for employees to develop and practice those skills. One, so if we look on the right-hand side, where employees may look for ways to grow their existing skills, do I have career mobility? Individual development plans, performance plans, always, that's performance processes baked in to most organizations. But exploring other ways, maybe apprenticeships. It's, back in the day, it's maybe I had to go through a career change because I wanted to do something else, but maybe I can seek an internal apprenticeship. But allowing employees to initiate the ability to deploy their skills in addition to what you're doing to help deploy skills, right? And that's that higher level talent processes, the workforce planning, the succession planning, high potential development. But you need to be potential about skills, how individuals will develop and deploy those skills where they can be successful, and how it fits into their career growth in your organization. All right, next slide. I know we're moving along, and we're going to get to some questions here in just a moment. Now, and I talked about this before, but it's the value of the skills. We talked about, skills that may be scarce in your organization, therefore they're more expensive or they may have higher value. Same as with emerging skills, or you may be saturated with skills and they don't necessarily have as much value in the organization because you have a surplus of what you need. But there's no right combination. The important thing is that you place value on skills and you think about the strategy to which you're going to demonstrate that. And last point on this topic, which is very important, differentiate between skill engagement and true skill value. Because if we think about skill engagement, so many people have rated a skill and so many people have looked at learning and so many people have re-rated a skill. That's all important. It shows that your people are engaged with skills and what percentage of your population you need to communicate to emphasize the importance. But on the flip side of that, it's how you use that skill data and it's the underlying information. Again, I talked about skill volume and proficiency. It's good to know how many skills you have in the organization, but it's even more important to know how many skills relevant to the demand. So if I know what my target audience size is and I compare the amount of skills that I have within that target audience, if I'm looking for a specific skill, I'm looking at volume. And then maybe proficiency, right? I need to know that if I'm delivering learning, that people are growing in their knowledge and their capabilities around a skill, so proficiency. And those are just 2 data points, but it's very important that you narrow down on your data points. And you don't need more than 2 to get a lot of value. But it's then understanding, what are my gaps? Have I effectively closed those gaps? Am I looking at new skills, or do I need to revisit my existing skills to determine, do I need to increase more people that have that skill, or do I need to increase proficiency across my organization? But building value around skills and making sure you're getting the right data points, and skill engagement doesn't necessarily equal skill value. It's how are skills progressing at the organization. So next slide, please. And when we talk about this, I love to say, and you're going to hear different terms like skill velocity. I love the fact that, one, are my skills growing, and at which pace are my skills growing? So this is an example from Degreed, where we show 5 top skills and how they're progressing over a period of Q1 2022 to Q4 2023. And when I talk about skill volume progression, I can start to see this. So problem solving, we were at, Q1 2022, we were around maybe the 150 point. Now we're pushing, close to 180 in the volume or the supply of skills that we have in the organization. Now, this metric doesn't have relative to your target population, but this is, as you can see, the 5 most popular skills across the organization. But looking at that progression over time. So this is just one way to look at it. It's not just saying, how many do I have, but how many am I growing over time? Because if I put out if I was looking to, and let's take the example of active listening here, which starts out at the lowest in Q1. Now I see it progressing over time. So it's gone from a maybe 75 to gone from a 75 to about a 155. That's pretty good progression over that amount of time. Is that the progression that I want? But that's one of the ways they can look. One data point, I'm looking at skill volume relative to my target population over time, and I can see that it's an upward trend. So that's good, right? I don't want to see things that may be going into decline, because that may indicate that people with skills are leaving the company. So very important to look at things like skill supply and looking at your velocity. How are you progressing over time, and how does it line up with the programs that you're delivering? All right, so next slide, please. All right, I'm going to pull all this together, and we're going to get some questions here. But important to think about, where are we today? Again, if we think about that timeline, we want to move from to. So we want to move from studying to retain information to acquiring knowledge and skills to do new things. It's a big stretch. We want to move away from, just focus on my learning only happens in the classroom, and it's stretching oneself in the flow of work and life. So if we think about education, exposure, experiences, how do I expand that knowledge and find new opportunities to learn that doesn't necessarily have to be in a classroom? So these are just examples here, but it's the managing the change in the culture, getting your employees focused behind it. And then once you have that, it'll be much easier to get the organization to move along. Right, so pause. I know we've got some great questions here. I think that we had a question slide to end it up, Claude, but any other points to add?
Actually, I have a couple points to make related to the questions. So let's go to the questions. Um, we're getting questions like what are in demand skills and what are the top 3 skills that everyone at the C level and senior management level need to have. And I mean, I can give an answer. Steve probably has an opinion, but I think we have to go back to it really depends on your organization. These are the questions we get a lot is that people just want us to tell them what the top skills are. And we go back to what Steve was saying about the skills data and understanding what you have and what you need. And that, whatever you don't have and whatever you think you need, filling the gap between those are the most in demand skills. Generically, I think for leaders, to answer one of the questions, I think what our research shows, it's things like critical thinking, collaboration, empathy, active listening for leaders is very important. You've got to solve a lot of complex problems. You can't do it on your own. So you need to work with people. You need to think critically and differently. You need to understand what people may be going through. You need to communicate. So those are pretty universal skills that every leader needs. But again, the level of skill development that you need, the urgency of those skills really depends on your particular situation. Steve?
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Yes, and that is, you know, if we top skills, it goes back to your business, and I think that's so important. The research that's out there, I think, is very helpful for that guide. Again, it comes back down to the organization. I go back to that comment where, what are the top 3 skills that everyone at the C-level manager? There's a couple of ways that you can look at doing that, right? So typically when that individual is hired in as an executive, they get promoted to that executive level. There's a lot of executive coaching that happens, and perhaps even 360 assessments. So it's looking at different, again, getting back to the data points. So if I'm looking at 360, if I'm looking at my 360 assessments for all of my executives, I can start to see, and based on those executives, I can compare those that are most successful, maybe have had the greatest trajectory at the company, and those that maybe have been a little bit more flat. And I compare, right? What are the skills, behaviors, characteristics that these individuals have that highly successful versus those that are not as successful? And are those characteristics or skills that I need to emulate or grow across my organization because I'm taking the executive team as examples? So it's looking at it a different way. Yeah, I can tap into my 360 data. I can infer skill data from that, and I can see our executive team specifically, those that are most successful have these specific skills. So it's the top 3 skills. It's different for everyone. Love Claude's answer. My point to this as well is take a little bit of time to know about your situation, because there's a lot of great untapped data that's there that just needs to be looked at a little bit differently.
Right. And what Steve's saying and what I'm saying about really understanding what you have, also it helps in your skill development. It also helps you in terms of hiring people, because if you can show that your most successful leaders in your companies have skills X, Y, and Z, then you need to make sure that the people that you're looking to hire have those skills, because they're more likely to be successful. So that also helps you. And so the data, I think, is really the key to this, is what you have, what the gap is, what you don't have, what you think you need. And just keep in mind as we wrap up here too, and why we're kind of hedging on the answer to questions like what are the most demand skills and what are the top 3 skills. Just remember that a year ago, if you had asked whether you should focus on AI or Gen AI, people would kind of said, no, that's not that important, maybe someday. And then all of a sudden ChatGPT comes in and everybody's talking about Gen AI all the time. And now what's one of the most demanded skills we have? Gen AI or programming languages related to AI. A year ago, nobody would have said that. A year from now, who knows? You remember back maybe in July or even earlier that in 2022, everybody was talking about the metaverse. Do you hear anybody talking about the metaverse now? You do not. So things change. And that's why I like to say too that the foundational skills, the human power skills, are longer lasting. Develop those. If you're in doubt on what your technical skills and don't not do anything, focus on the foundational skills. And then as you gain data on the technical skills that you need, then you can train on those. But in the meantime, you're focusing on these other things that are going to be long lasting. So Steve, I'll give you the last word before we sign off, and thank you in advance for your presentation today.
Well, thank you. And yeah, and just one from, of course, our Chief Transformation Officer, Janice Burns. It's she uses the term a lot, skill durability, right? Those skills that they're durable over time. I love that you close that out with that. Very important. So I just want to thank everybody again. This is one of my favorite topics to speak on. Feel free to reach out and connect on LinkedIn, and would love to, just have conversations or talk about skills in general. I think this is, I think we're at a very exciting point right now. In people, right? And people in the workforce. And I think this is this levels of skills and levels the playing field. So I'll leave the group with that.
All right, well, thank you, Steve. Thank you to Degrade, and most importantly, thank to everyone who registered and attended today. Thanks for taking your time. We know you have a lot of things you can do with your time. We appreciate you spending the time with us. So we look forward to seeing you in another webinar real soon, and have a great day, week, and holiday season. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.